All right, today we're going to be looking at how to set up equations and inequalities, and we're going to set up all of these, but not necessarily solve all of them. So that's why I've written solve on a few of these, just to help you guys out. So what we're going to look at are those keywords and phrases on page 15 of our notes, of those inequality phrases and equation phrases. So it helps us to know how we are going to set it up in order to solve it. So the first one says, Joshua had a choice between Store A and Store B to rent a video game. Store A charges $3.50 per game plus a monthly membership fee of $4. Store B, so I'm going to do Store B is a different color. Store B charges $5 per game with no membership fee. The monthly cost to rent a game depends on the number of games G rented. So that is my variable. Write an inequality to represent the situation where the monthly cost of Store A is less than the monthly cost of Store B. So when you first read that, there's a lot going on. But if you go to that very last sentence, it's telling you right there we want to write an inequality. So that's less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So you need to look for your key phrases. But they want Store A to be less than Store B. So what I like to do is write it out in my phrases first. So Store A to be less than Store B. So we need to write the expression to represent Store A. So if we look back, they charge $3.50 per game. So if you had 2 games, you would do $3.50 times 2. If you had 5 games, $3.50 times 5, and so on and so forth. But we don't know how many games there are. That's why that letter G is my variable. So $3.50 times how many games, but there's an additional cost of $4 every month. So that's how we would write that. That's $3.50 every game plus $4 membership fee. And we want that all to be less than the cost of Store B. Store B charges $5 per game, no membership fee, so that means no additional cost. So the 4 is your constant in Store A, because even if you don't rent any games that month, you still pay that membership fee. So this is how it would be set up to solve, but you can solve that one if you like. I just want to make sure that we have some practice on some other ones. So if you would like to set up and solve this and double check with your teacher if you got it right, go ahead and do that. Pause the video and then come back if you'd like to. All right, but the next 2 we are going to set up and solve them. So let's look and see what's happening here. It says the local carnival offers 2 ways to pay. Option 1 charges $36 per day plus $2.50 per ride, whereas option 2 offers a $12 per day plus $4.50 per ride. Write an equation, so they're already telling me to write an equation, to represent a situation where the amounts are the same. Even if it didn't have this word equation, if it said represent a situation, write a situation where they are the same, that helps you out to know they're equal. And they're telling you that the rides for 1 day. So sometimes when you guys are looking at this, you're like, well, $36 per day, well, that means $36 times the days. But they're telling you your variable, we're just looking at 1 day altogether. So let's look. We want option 1 to be equal to option 2. So if we look at option 1, we want the expression that represents their information. And they're already telling me that R is my variable for rides. So you're paying $36 at that carnival as soon as you go in. You don't even have to write any rides, but you've paid $36. Plus $2.50 per ride. So that's my expression for option 1. And we want it to be the same. When is it going to be where you're paying the same at option 2? So you're paying $12 when you go in. So it's a less amount just to go in, but the rides are more expensive. So this is math in the real world, that sometimes you're going to spend less when you go in, but more on the rides. And other times you spend more going in, but less on the rides. So you'd have to figure out, okay, how many rides would I want to ride for it to be a better cost for me. So that's why we're going over these things. All right, so now we have our equation so for them to be the same. So now we go through our checklist that we've been talking about. So we have variables on both sides. There's no distributive property on either side. There's no combining like terms on either side, so I need to move my variable. So if I move my variable, I'm going to move the positive 250R, and that cancels out. We have 36 on the left and 12 over here, and 450 minus 250 would be 2R. So now I have a two-step equation. Once the variables are on both sides, we want to move them to be on one side. And I need to get rid of that constant when I solve a two-step equation. So minus 12 or 12 negatives on both sides. That cancels out. 36 minus 12, I'm just going to move my work over here, is 24. And on the right-hand side, I always have 2R. And then my last step, get that R by itself. The opposite of multiply by 2 is divide by 2. So R equals 2. So that means, R equals 12, excuse me. I was writing the 2 dividing by 2. I almost forgot that 1. That would make it a whole different number. So that means at 12 rides, you would spend the same exact amount of money. Okay? So there will be some today where you're just going to have to find the inequality or equation that it matches to, and some that you're going to have to write itself and solve. So that's why I'm showing you both. All right, let's try number 3 together. It says, Sydney needs to purchase a math textbook for her class. She can either purchase the book used for $120 or she can rent the book for $12 per day. Write an inequality to represent when the amount of renting the books costs less than buying. So we're going to compare renting to buying. And they're letting the letter D represent the number of days. So if you're renting it, you're paying per day. So again, write this out in a phrase so then it helps you where your numbers are going to go like we did up here. So we want the cost of renting the books to be less than the cost of buying the books. So the first one I'm going to look at, okay, well, if you're renting, and this is where you have to be careful because a lot of people say, oh, it's $120 because that was the first number I saw. But read carefully. The rent was $12 per day. So we would say 12 times the amount of days is less than, well, if you're buying or purchasing the book, you're paying that one time, $120. So if they were just asking us to write the inequality, we could do this. But remember, we could also, if you don't see it like that, 12D is less than 120, which means 120 is greater than 12D. So just to help you guys out, because sometimes they want to make sure you're paying attention to that. This is open to the 120. So if you saw the 120 first, it has to still be open to that 120. Just something to think about. So we're going to go ahead and solve it. And I'm going to solve it this way just because my brain sees it a little bit better right here. All right, so what we've already practiced, we're going to circle our inequality sign and bring it down. There's no distributive property. There's no combining like terms. And it's already a one step, so there's no having to move the constant. Our coefficient is positive, so that means my inequality sign is going to stay the same. We're only going to reverse that less than sign to greater than if this was a negative coefficient. So the opposite of multiply by 12 is divide by 12. So D is less than 10. So what this represents, or if it was an answer choice, it might look like this. 10 is greater than D. So these two mean the same exact thing. So what this inequality represents is if she's renting the book up for 10 days, then she's going to be, or 9 days, 12 times 9, 12 times 8, she's going to be spending less money. But if she needs it over 10 days, it's going to be better for her to buy it. Okay? So let's keep going and see what's going on with this. So on the next one, it says, a cheerleading team wants to attend a competition at the end of the month. They have two options for paying the entrance fee. Again, we're just going to set this one up. We're not going to solve it. The first option is for each person on the team to pay a $12 fee. So first option is a $12 fee. The second option is a $40 fixed fee plus $8 per person. If the team has n number of people, so we don't know how many people they have just yet, that's my variable, write an inequality to determine when the first option would be the cheaper. So if it's the first option is the cheaper, what that really means is that the first option is less than the second option. Or you can even think about it as the second option is greater than the first option. Okay? So either way you want to see that. Oh, I forgot to do my color. Let's do in the first option in purple. Just to keep it consistent with how we're going to set these up. Help your brain see it. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that. So if I'm going to see that this is the cheaper option, and we want to write it like that, I'm going to go with this part. But just to keep it in mind that sometimes the way you write it, they might have written it differently, but they actually mean the same thing based on if they wrote it this way. That means the same thing as how we wrote it. So the first option, they're paying a $12 fee. But each person has to pay that. So it's $12 times the amount of people is less than, well, each person's going in is paying a $40 fee, or excuse me, for their group, it's $40 plus the $8 per person. So here's that key phrase right here. Each person to pay $12. So that's why we said 12 times n. This one, the team is just paying $40, and it's a little cheaper rate at $8 per person. So again, we're not going to solve this just yet, but it's set up if you'd like to solve it. So if you want to try and solve this out and reach out to your teacher and see what your inequality would be, that would be really good practice. But I just want to kind of go through this and give y'all some time on your own. So try and solve that if you like. So pause the video, and you can message or email your teacher, and we can let you know if you're right. All right, let's look at a couple more. So we're going to set up and solve these next two, and then just set up that last one. So number 5 says Champion Cable charges $29.99 per month for basic cable service, plus $5.99 per month for HD channels. Adventure Cable charges $15.99 for basic cable, plus $7.50 per month for the HD channels. If C represents the number of HD channels, write an equation that will represent when the two companies will charge the same amount. So same amount means equal to. So let's talk about it. We want Champion Cable to be equal to the Adventure Cable. And they're telling me that C is representing the HD channels. Okay? So $29.99 plus $5.99 for those HD channels. And we don't know how many HD channels they're using, so that's why we're going to write their variable C. So $5.99 for every channel. For Champion Cable, that's that option. Adventure, you have a little bit less that you're spending on basic cable, but you're paying a little bit more for those HD channels. So it's an additional cost, so that's why we're adding. Okay, so that's your equation right there. That's the first step. But now we are going to solve this one to see when it's the exact same. So I'm going to draw my line to help me out. There's no distributive property. There's no combining like terms. So we need to move the variable. So I'm going to move this positive $5.99. That cancels out and gets me $29.99 on the left, $15.99. And again, we can use our calculator. You can use your Desmos calculator if you'd like. I'm just going to use my regular calculator right here. So 7.50 minus $5.99. So my coefficient is $1.51. If you think about it like money, just like that. Now we need to move the constant. So minus $15.99. So this cancels out. I'm going to move my work over here a little bit. So even if you want to use your calculator again, $29.99 minus 15.99. It's going to give you exactly 14. And then over here we have $1.51. And then our variable C. So don't let the decimal fractions confuse you. It's still the same concept. This number in front of the letter means that you're multiplying, so we need to divide. So 14 divided by $1.51, it's going to get you 9.2715 and so on and so on. But if we're talking about money, write an equation that represents when the two companies will charge the same amount, and the C represents the channels, well, can you have this amount of channels? So we would say around 9 channels. So we'd say around 9 channels. So it'd be around 9 channels for them to be about the same, because you can't have 9.3 of a channel. All right, let's keep going. So number 6. Santiago wants to rent a scooter to explore the city. He can choose from 2 companies. The first company charges a $20 rental fee per day plus 17 cents for each mile driven. That's supposed to be a decimal right there. Sorry about that. For each mile driven. The second company does not charge a rental fee but does charge 22 cents per mile. So this one's a little bit more per mile, but you're saving money because you don't have that rental fee. Write an inequality represent the number of miles, M, when the first company would charge more than the second company. So we're comparing the first company to the second. So the first company would charge more. So that means the first company would charge more than the second company. Okay? So let's look at our first company. First company charges $20 rental fee plus 17 cents per mile. So $20 plus 17 cents for every mile. And the second company has no rental fee but 22 cents per mile. So if they asked me just to set up an inequality, we would be finished, but we actually are going to solve this one. So again, we go through our checklist. I circle my inequality sign. Decide if that's going to stay or we're going to reverse it if it's a negative coefficient. So there's no distributive property, no combining like terms. So we are going to move a variable. So we get rid of a 1700ths with a negative 1700ths. That cancels out and gets you 20 over here. And then 22 minus 17. Do 0.22 minus 0.17 is 5 cents. Now we need to look at our coefficient. This is a positive, so that means my inequality sign is going to stay. And then we're going to divide by 500ths. Let's move my work again over here. So 20 divided by 500ths is 400. And we kept our inequality sign the same, and we got my letter M by itself. Okay? So the first company, I know this looks a little weird, so if you don't see it like this, you could rewrite it. Put the M on the left and the 400 on the right, but it has to be opened up to the 400. So these two things mean the same exact thing. So if you're solving these and you keep it like this, but you don't see that as an answer choice, just know that this means the same thing. So in order for the first company to be charging more, then the miles have to be less than 400 for that first company to be charged more. All right, the last one we're not going to solve. Again, if you'd like to pause the video, or we're actually ending with this, and you want to reach out to your teacher to see if you got it correct, that would be great practice. So it says Carly's height in inches can be represented by the statement below. So they're giving us a little riddle. Half of Carly's height is 3/4 of Carly's height minus 15. Is your key word right there for equal to. Okay? So we're just going to write the equation to be used to find her height if we would like to. Half, if you take half of something, if I said what's half of 10, a lot of you just said divide by 2. but really you're multiplying by 1/2. Of is a keyword for multiplication. So we could say half of her height is equal to 3/4 of is a keyword for multiply, Carly's height minus 15. Okay, so half of Carly's height is 3/4 of her height minus 15. So you really got to pause and take your time when you're reading these, because when you read them too fast, it's very hard to write these equations and inequalities. But when you pause kind of out how I am when you're reading, it's going to help you to understand what's going on. So again, if you'd like to solve that, you can, but you don't have to.